All right, so we gave all the candidates some ground rules. We wanted you to focus on the issues. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I'm Desmond Underwood. I'm the vice president. I was gonna say principal, sorry, teacher. Vice president of the Highlands HOA. We just wanted to welcome you all to this West Side candidate night. The West Side needs a little bit of love. And we need to be active. So we wanted to really highlight that and give you guys an opportunity to come and hear all of the candidates. All right, so we gave some ground rules. We wanted you guys to all focus on the issues, not individuals. No personal attacks. We really don't care as voters what you guys have done yet, shows your integrity or lack thereof, but we care what you're gonna do for us. So just keep it out. Nobody wants to hear it. Prohibition on negative speech. Stay on the topic. Respect time limits, 2 minutes. The moderator authority. Our moderators are Kyle and Shelly from the board. Let's see, what else? No mention of other candidates' names unless you're directly responding to them, which we shouldn't have that. And respect for all participants. So now we will turn it over. Like I said, we have we actually collected resident input and formed 3 to 4, depending on time, questions that every candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, okay? And you'll see the clock up there, you'll see it on the screen as well, okay? And the moderators do reserve the right to focus everybody back, so here we go. Don't want it to just be all muted.
All right, thank you guys so much for being here. We're really happy to have each and every one of you. I do want to just tag on to the rules you guys have in your packet if you need to reference it, but there are 3 different violations and you could be removed from the debate. We're very serious about these. Go ahead and advance. So just to kind of give a highlight, we are not repeating any of the questions that happened at the East Side debate. Those pretty much went over who you are, why you're here, and what you're standing for. So we're going to get into the hard topics tonight. When you come up for the first time, you can't introduce your name, but we're not digging into who you are. We want to hit the topics. They're very important to us. We do have your names up on the screen behind for the guests in attendance to be able to take a peek at, but you can go ahead and we're going to get going. So our first question of the night, and we are going to randomly ask you guys to come up, and so that way the different 4 questions that we have, there will be a different order. The question, how would you work to improve political unity in Winter Springs? What do you see as the biggest challenge facing the city in the next 20 years, and how would you address it? And Matt Benton, you're first.
The first part of that question concerned political unity.
Yes.
And the second part concerned what would we want to do in the next 20 years. What was the rest of the question?
How would you work to improve political unity in Winter Springs, and what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the city in the next 20 years, and how would you address it?
As far as political unity, we are in a nonpartisan race. People do have ideas about different ways they'd like to see our city be. And that's been a challenge for the last several years. There's a contingent that, for want of a better word, would like to see the city change, grow, whatever, in the way that the citizens would like it, and not be changing zoning ordinances or zoning to allow that to happen for whatever the quickest dollar is. The other contingent has shown in the past by the people that were elected that they were willing to do that. I'm trying to keep this within your rules. Don't want to kick out this early. By the next 20 years, what I'd like to see
30 seconds.
is the next 20 years, I would love to see our city within the next 5 years, see much of our infrastructure that has been started 4 or 5 years ago, see a lot of that done. And then there's probably another 4 or 5 years of under the ground infrastructure we need to see redone. Our city is about 65 years old, and it's at the point where some things need to be done. After that, I think concentrating on what the city.
Thank you so much. Next, Paul Diaz.
Thank you very much for the question. Actually, you know what? I've given this question a lot of thought. Let me talk about political unity first. Leadership means bringing everybody to the table. Nothing will bring unity more to the city of Winter Springs than getting the job done. We just had a consent order come and hit the city that we have a year in which to get the plans done and a few years just to get the plants taken care of, the wastewater plants. If you have houses underwater, guess what? That does not create unity. Unity is done by actually getting the job done. Nobody would be bickering if, guess what? Prosperity was amongst all of us at the same time, equally amongst everybody. Now, part two of the question was for the next 20 years. Let me tell you something. Instead of looking at the next 20 years, because once we solve our infrastructure problems, we're talking about 50 and 100 years. If we're looking at as far as 20 years, we need to be looking at the next year, the next 3 years, the next 4 years, because the last 4 haven't gotten us to where we need to be today. And right now, what we need is leadership, and that leadership is going to unify the city, and it's also going to go ahead and bring all the stakeholders to the table. And guess what? You know who the most important stakeholder is to the table that's going to bring the unity? All of you, every single one of us. I'm a voter, I'm a resident, just like you. You know what? If it's good for me, it's going to be good for you. And you know what's going to be good? Wastewater, stormwater, and putting our fiscal house in order here in the city.
30 seconds.
I yield the rest of my time.
Sarah Baker.
Sarah Baker.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Nice to see everybody tonight. For unity, I think the biggest thing we need to do is just work together. You know, we have to actually listen to one another and reach out to the community, open communication, talk to one another about what the problems are, what the solutions are, make sure everyone is informed. Nobody can unify when they don't have informed decision making happening. So make sure that everybody is on the same page, even when we don't agree. So as long as we're kind to one another, I think unity can be a lot better within the city. But for the next 20 years, I think something that we really are going to be challenged with is foresight. We have this city that has been built and outgrown our infrastructure. And how do we continue to grow or keep up with our growth if we don't have infrastructure that is even capable of where we stand today? So any project that we move forward with, we have to say, okay, how many lots are left to be developed? What is the zoning for that development? If we allow more development, is the infrastructure going to actually uphold that development? Or are we going to be in this place again in 20 years? So we have to have the foresight to really look forward, and I think that's the biggest challenge we currently face.
Thank you. Karen Meyer.
I was wondering how you knew that.
Hello, my name is Karen Meyer, and I am campaigning for seat 3, Commission Winter Springs. For unity, we all have different opinions about how we would like to see the conduct in our commission meetings, but it depends on the persons sitting on the dais to govern themselves on their conduct. I would like to see everyone have a civil interaction. That isn't always the case, but you have to not dwell on that. You have to move forward and get the issues taken care of. "20 years growth, that's a long time to plan for, but we should have long-term planning. And that hasn't been addressed in the last few years. But I believe that the city commissioners that are sitting on the board now are addressing those issues. We're dealing with the wastewater treatment plants. We have nearly completed the design phase of that project. We're moving forward on that. The city is addressing the floodwaters that come through our community. We can do so much,
30 seconds.
but we can't do everything. We are under restrictions by state and federal guidelines, so we do what we can. Was there a third question?
Just, I think, how you would address, so. Mark Caruso.
Okay, what they all said, no. So, unity. Politics is ugly, as we all know. You know, a lot of us probably lost friends and family about politics. Why? It's terrible. I try to keep everything positive. You see me standing on the corner, 434, almost every morning now. I have my big sign. I'm waving to everybody. I'm trying to keep it positive. I'm doing my little videos. Always trying to keep it positive. When I go to the meetings, if I do a speech, I keep it positive. I try. I do my best. It's not easy. We all have a lot of emotions built up right now with a lot of going on with our infrastructure. We do have a consent order now, and that's a fact. It just came out the other day. And actually, we have about 730 something days to have a fully functional wastewater plant. That's not a lot of time to build a plant. It's not. We're going to have a tough time with that. We're going to have to get help from the state. I think we know that already. As far as the 20-year plan, I want to see a 5-year plan because we're growing so fast, and Winter Springs is a bedroom community. We're 90% plus or minus residential. We know that. Our tax base could be a little better. You know, other cities around us do better than we are. It's easier on the residents with the tax base. It's clear, we know that. Public safety is number one for me. I want to make sure that our police force can handle our growth within the next 5 to 10 years. 20 years is a long way off, we can't predict that. So we need to start at the 5-year mark, which is around the corner. Thank you.
Rob Elliott.
Hi, my name is Rob Elliott. I'm currently a commissioner in District 5. As far as political unity, it's not easy. And one of the reasons is the state of Florida has very strong sunshine laws. So for me to meet individually with a commissioner or commissioners without being in the public, it's actually against the law. So it makes it tough for us to communicate ahead of time during the meetings. As far as political unity within the community, I don't see a whole lot of disunity. I see different opinions, but the unity lies in the fact that every one of you, in my opinion, loves Winter Springs. That's why you live here. The fact that we have different opinions as far as where things should go, that's part of the political process. But I am not a big fan of the stringent sunshine laws, which keeps me from being able to communicate as closely as I would like to with my fellow commissioners. As far as where I'd like to be 20 years from now, we are currently in the process of updating our comprehensive plan. And when public hearings come out about that, I would invite every one of you to show up and let's hear your input as where we should be 20 years from now. But in reality, it's all about infrastructure. We need to handle our stormwater. We need to handle our sewers and our water treatment plants and get them built. The plants we have now are built in 1970 and they were used back then. We need not to kick the can down the road, but tackle these important issues because as far as I'm concerned, it's all about infrastructure and where we can be over the next 20 years. When I talk to folks, they always ask about parks. So I'd like to put an emphasis on more parks and improvement of the parks that we have. Thank you.
All right, we are moving on to our second question tonight. And that question has to do with the development of land in Winter Springs. So Candidates, what measures will you take to ensure any future development near the Highlands aligns with the character of the community and addresses concerns like traffic, flooding, and environmental impact? That's the first part of the question. Second part, how will you involve residents in these decisions? And then finally, additionally, under what circumstances would you vote to lift the conservation easement on the old golf course property? And we're going to ask Mr. Diaz if you would be the first to respond.
This is a great question, and I'll tell you, it's definitely a hot topic that needs to be discussed. Here's what happens. Let's cut to the chase and get to the actual issue at hand. For the west wastewater plant to be built, 10 to 22 acres of the old golf course has to be deeded to the city, has to be purchased by the city. The city had the opportunity to do it, and they didn't. The city had the opportunity to buy the entire golf course. They didn't. And now we're manufacturing an issue with the conservation easement. That land is, at this point, unbuildable. The amount of sand packed that it would take to be able to build on that makes a project from a capital standpoint unworkable. So instead of political games, we need to look at what is the reality, which is capital. Development means someone had to put capital in place to go ahead and build, okay? So you can't do it now because it's not profitable. And if it's not profitable, it's not gonna get done. However, what has to get done now, and tying up the hands of the commission or of the city or of anybody else, is getting the 10 to 20 acres that the west wastewater plant needs immediately to get built. If you haven't seen it, it's a small pie-shaped little lot. It's unusable. It needs to have the land around it. I've actually toured the plant. I've walked the plant. I was there with the utilities director. He explained everything to me, and I saw what needs to be done. Right now, we have to stop playing political games with this issue.
Thank you. The magic 8 ball says our contestant number 2 is going to be Commissioner Benton.
If y'all haven't figured it out, I'm probably a lot more comfortable singing in church or even preaching a sermon than speaking like this. Debating is not my strong suit, but I'd like to say some things I've done toward these things y'all are talking about. A couple of years ago, I proposed a moratorium that the commission voted in, that we did specifically to make it so we had stronger waste drainage policies. Maybe a deeper pond. We went with the same statistics, the same way to do it that the highway does, which is the strongest of any city right now in Seminole County. Recently, I did propose, and it was accepted, that it'd be harder to lift this conservation easement over here. That it would take a super majority. If something really needs it, we'll get 4 votes. But it does make it more difficult than just getting 3 votes. The idea that we have to have that 10 to 12 acres, that's one method of doing it. There are other methods that are being looked at. And I'm gonna leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. If Karen Meyer.
I absolutely support the measure to have a supermajority to protect the conservation lands and our parklands. I think it's vital to the community. Residents have spoken in the past, they want more green space. And as far as the Highlands, these are serious issues. And if you build on that golf course, you're going to exacerbate the flooding issues and the drainage. I believe that we should keep that property as conservation land. Residents, the city of Winter Springs reaches out to all the residents. If there is an issue concerning a certain area, residents are notified perhaps by postcard or by email, that there will be a meeting to discuss the proposal. They have the opportunity to come and to learn. And if you have any questions about what is going to be developed or what the plans would be, you should always reach out to the city manager. The city manager is like the CEO. He has his staff, and he will go and he will get the answers if he doesn't have them at hand, and the resident will be informed with the answers they're looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next respondent is Sarah Baker.
I want to address a development near the Highlands first. I think, development is inevitable. Things are zoned accordingly already. So what we do with that zoning is what's important, and I think we can do things like setbacks and traffic, where we have different lights or more turn lanes, or we do car counts and whatnot. There's studies to be done. So what goes into those spaces, they might be zoned a certain way, but we can have a say in what actually goes on that property. Is it gonna benefit our community, or is it gonna hurt our community? And I think that's really important. So that can be town hall, or that can be you contacting any one of the people on the dais and voicing your opinion, because your opinion does matter. We're all neighbors at the end of the day, and we all live here and don't want to be impacted by anything negative. So, and as far as environmental impact, I don't know if any of you know where I live, but I live on Winter Springs Boulevard, and I live on a creek, on Howell Creek and Bear Creek. And easements are there because of flooding. I have a huge flood in my yard on a regular basis. So if we develop in these areas that already have conservation easements, I think the conservation easements should stay, but I also think that they need to be addressed, and any building needs to be addressed with additional stormwater routing and engineers that actually focus on solving that problem. There are solutions to it instead of making it worse.
Thank you. Next up, Commissioner Elliott.
So the future development of the Highlands, I have always been and have been reinforcing that the conservation easements stay on that property. I do know we are in negotiations with the owner to obtain some additional property for our wastewater treatment plants. Those conversations are ongoing. There has not been a settlement yet, but there's also an alternative plan to build that plant without that property. It can be done. And so our engineering firms are still looking at that if in fact we end up not being able to get that property. Residents are always involved in these decisions. If there is a development being proposed, these developers are required to have a public input type meeting. You're all invited to come and let these folks know. I'm sure a lot of you remember not too long ago Pulte Homes and how that didn't go through, and a lot of that is based on input from y'all. We had a conservation easement over on the west side of town, or excuse me, the east side of town, that we passed a resolution to reinforce. That stopped hundreds of apartments being built that would empty out onto Winter Springs Boulevard and severely impact the residents over there. So these builders and developers, they're required to send in reports that tell us the impact on our utilities, the impact on our schools, the impact on our traffic. They have to let us know what impact there is. So we don't go into any of this blindly. Zoning laws, they can be changed depending on what the commission wants to do. So that's not always the safest fallback.
Thank you. And Mr. Caruso.
The golf course is very sensitive right now, as we all know. I don't think we should change anything about it. It should stay the way it is, conservation, but the residents mostly should have the decision. I'm a boots on the ground type of guy. I want to go door to door. I want to hear from you. I want to get the people involved. I do that now. I'm going door to door every day, me and my wife. I'll do it. If we have to send emails, I don't care for that. I'd rather be face to face. I want to hear from you. I want to get you involved. I want to get you to the city meetings. That's where you're going to get your answers. When it comes to the vote, I think when all of the commissioners together understand what the residents want, and right now I don't believe they do, but we need a great reset in this city. We need to have commissioners that work together for the residents, not for themselves, not for a special interest, not for any of that. We are here for you. I've been in this city a long time. My kids grew up here. I've seen a lot of the changes that go on. I'm not happy about a lot of them, and I know you're not either. So we need to band together and be a team, because that's what this is. We're teamwork.
30 seconds.
Together, we can keep that property what we want it to be. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third question of the evening has to do with drainage and water infrastructure. So neighborhoods like the Highlands face frequent flooding and issues with aging water treatment facilities. What is your plan to upgrade the stormwater drainage and water systems to ensure safe, clean water and prevent flooding? How will you prioritize these upgrades in the city's budget? And what is your timeline for completing them? And first up is Sarah Baker.
This is a fabulous question that I don't have the answers to, and I'm not going to lie to you about that. I'm not on the commission. I've not had enough time to really look into the Highlands a lot. I know that it's an issue. It's an issue across most of Winter Springs. So I know it's a forefront issue in all of your minds. So it's something that I think a lot of engineering needs to go into, a lot of thought needs to go into. I heard at a recent commission meeting that if we were to ask for the engineers of the Army to do it for us, it would take 10 years just to get that request put in. And my question is, why haven't we already put in the request? You know, like what's stopping us from actually doing this stuff? Obviously you need it. So obvious development is going to cause more problems. So we need to address the stormwater before we look into more development. We need to move funds around. We need to look for grants. We need to look for help outside of our city, for the county, to the state, to federal. Whatever it is, we need to work for you guys to make it happen. And I'm willing to do the research to get in there and do that.
Karen Meyer.
There are 5 commissioners on the commission. Not one acts independently. It is a vote of the commission to the direction of the city. These issues need to be addressed by the whole commission, and they are working to mitigate the flooding in areas. The creeks are being cleaned out as best we can under the restrictions that we have from the federal and the state. The ponds are being cleaned out. The ponds that we have responsibility for, we tasked our lawyer to investigate the deeds of all of the ponds. They're all written differently. Some ponds we have no responsibility for. Some ponds we have a marginal responsibility for, and some ponds we're it. So these things need to be investigated. Decisions need to be made to best move forward with flooding.
30 seconds.
How would you prioritize? You prioritize based on the judgment of your consulting engineers to make sure that you're dealing with the immediate needs first. That might not make everybody happy, but that's how it needs to be. You need to prioritize any subject that you're working with. It comes down to choices.
Thank you. Mark Caruso?
So we have options for our wastewater, and yes, we can get grants, yes, we can get outside funding, we can get help from the state, but I don't think we're gonna be able to do it in the timeline that the DEP is requiring us to do it in. It's just very, very difficult to do that. I've talked to the professionals about it. It's almost impossible. But one of the things that we can do that we're not doing right now is get us back into Iron Bridge. So we were in Iron Bridge at one time, and we're no longer in Iron Bridge, and it's a very difficult process to explain. I'm learning about it myself, but if you want to take that and go do research on that, you'll see for yourself what it is. I'd like to personally go visit the facility and see what it's about and get more of an understanding of it, because right now, priority-wise, that's our priority. There's nothing else that matters right now. It's our wastewater. That plant right here on the west side is probably one crack away from crumbling. We don't have enough time to fix it. That is number one, and that is what we need to focus on from this point on. Actually, we probably should have focused on it years back, but we haven't. So now, again, I'm gonna say this, we need fresh blood, fresh ideas to get these problems fixed, because they haven't been done in the past years. Thank you.
Rob Elliott?
So water is the source of all life. And recently in our community, water seems to have been the source of all discussion and controversy. Our wastewater treatment plants are in a sad state of repair. It's actually the east plant that's in worse shape than the west plant. The order that came out today, we were told we have to do the west plant first, which in my mind puts our residents in a dangerous situation. It's one thing to say boil your water, it's another thing to say you can't flush your toilet. So this is a high priority to get these things done. Engineering studies are almost completed on the wastewater treatment plants. We sent out just, I believe, in the last couple of days for bids for an engineering or for a construction firm to build these plants. So we're moving in the right direction, but it takes time. Just the permitting process is probably going to take us years. Stormwater, if you notice in Winter Springs, how much development have we done? How much paving over have we done that's creating all this stormwater? Not a whole lot. It's all coming from surrounding communities, has to pass through our community to get to the lake, to get to Lake Jessup. We've got a study going on right now, a multi-million-dollar study, stormwater study, to see what we can do to solve this problem with stormwater. It's a problem all over the country, all over the United States, and it's a big problem here. It's because of development. The more you pave, the water's got to go somewhere. Some of our older communities, where I live in Oak Forest, maybe even the Highlands, there aren't retention ponds. In addition, we just signed a contract with a firm that's going to take care of all our lakes and ponds and try to clean them up so they look like they used 2 years ago.
All right, thank you. Matt Benton?
This is a really good question, because these questions concern quality of life here in Winter Springs. Concerning the wastewater plants, 4 years ago when I came into office, I knew there were problems. I knew there had been at least a decade or so since people were told about the problems, but for whatever reason, nothing was done, and nothing that, when questioned, I could get an answer. So in 2019, they really started working on those plants to get them into this shape that they could be rebuilt. And I've heard people say that that was a waste, we shouldn't have done it. But imagine having 14,000 porta potties in our city. Just think about that. If that sewer plant stops working, that's where you're at. You're looking at, I think I added up the numbers, almost $300 million just in cost to keep that going. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is what we did. It was decided before I got on the commission was to get those things going and then to get new plants going. That is in process. We're right in the middle of it. I don't think we need to be changing course. I really think it's the right way to go. As far as flooding, one of the reasons that I proposed this conservation easement not be broken easily had to do with that, because you start paving that area over out there, the water's going to go somewhere. We've seen it all over the city. I've lived here 30 years, and I've seen when each new development comes in, water goes somewhere. Commissioner Constantine, I just talked with a couple of days ago. That idea didn't come from me. I discussed it. He's one that brought it up to me, and he was very excited that we did it. And I'd like to bring it forth as to the voters to make it a little more strength on that next election. Thank you.
All right, Paul Diaz.
I mean, every question is important, but I have to admit, this is probably the most important question we're going to discuss tonight. Let me tell you why stormwater is so important to me. How many of you remember August 24th, 1992, what happened in the state of Florida? Hurricane Andrew, a force 5, okay, 5 flags on a hurricane came through my house. I've lived through a hurricane. We talk about Ian like that's the only hurricane we've ever heard of, okay? These problems, to me, are personal, okay? When I saw neighbors of mine just blocks away, my lot, God bless the luck, it was like a little island. There were like rivers flowing around me. I'm across from the Gee Creek. All I hear every time the commission speaks about this issue are the 9 scariest words in the English language. We're all here old enough to remember what those are. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. The same people who don't clear out your creeks, don't deal with your ponds, don't deal with your drains are the same ones that are telling you, hey, give us 4 more years to do it. Let me tell you what happens here, okay? We need to be able to get and talk about modernizing our systems. We have reports about reports. I encourage you, it's public record. All these reports they're talking about, all these engineering reports, they have footnotes at the bottom and they address a previous report. All we have are reports about reports. We need to modernize our system. Hit the reset button. Smash the reset button. We need brand new people and blood on the commission. That's what we need.
All right, moving along, we're going to be talking about funding and the penny tax. Our next question tonight, many residents on our side of the city, the west side of the city, feel that more resources have been allocated to other areas in the past, leaving our neighborhoods here on the west side of Winter Springs in need of significant investment to catch up. With limited city resources, how will you ensure that critical projects on this side of the city receive proper funding? And then secondly, if the penny tax were renewed, how would you allocate funds the city receives from it? So we're going to ask that Commissioner Elliott, you go first in this round.
So to start off, I do support the penny sales tax. It taxes not only us residents, but anybody else who comes in our community, so it helps a lot. The city is required by interlocal agreement to submit a list of projects that penny sales tax is going to be used for. Now that list can be altered at times for different reasons, but right now there is a list if anybody's interested and how that money is going to be spent. It's public information. You can pull that list and see exactly where the money is to be allocated. If you're concerned about that, call one of the commissioners and let them know how you feel about things being done. But there's certain ways that money has to be spent. We have to tell the county how we're going to spend it. And again, that can be altered somewhat, but as far as where the money goes and how it's spent, that's already set in stone right now. So if you're interested in where the penny sales tax is going to go over the next few years, I urge you to go ahead and pull that information from the city website and you can find out exactly where it's allocated. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, Mr. Caruso.
This is not a good question for us candidates, not in office, I guess, but I do support the penny sales tax. I just hope that we have used it properly in the past according to the audits. I don't know if it actually was used the way it was supposed to. Some of it might have been moved around. I could be wrong. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I want to make sure that it gets used for our infrastructure mostly. That's the most important thing we need to use it for. The stormwater drains definitely need to be cleaned out. They're not getting cleaned out. There's people all around the city in all areas that can literally stand outside their windows and their doors and watch the sewers overflow. They're backing up. And of course, I've heard a lot from a lot of these people in the Highlands, the ranch lands. They're all around the city. They have these problems. We need to use that money and handle that issue along with our wastewater with that money. And that's all I could say about the penny sales tax, because I'm not well knowledgeable about it, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up, Mr. Diaz.
Well, the name of my company is the Tax Cuttery, so I'm not exactly, I didn't name it the Tax Raisery for a reason. Look, I'll tell you, the fastest way to get a government to live within its means is the same way that people have to live within their means. As a Dave Ramsey endorsed and trusted tax provider, I sometimes, when I have to teach some of the Dave Ramsey courses, Dave Ramsey uses a term. He says that a family has to be on beans and rice. Well, sometimes maybe the city needs to be on beans and rice too, because we splurge a lot. When we talk about a tax, and look, all of my friends support it. I'm just letting you know right now. Every tax. They support every tax. Every tax that passes, they love it, okay? They can't pass them fast enough. Let me tell you what happens. When you look at what government's role is not to entertain you. Government's role is to provide for public safety. That's your police and fire, okay? That when you flush your toilet, it works, okay? That's your sewer, your wastewater, okay? And that when it rains, and I'm not talking about, a 100-year storm. I'm talking about when it rains, okay, that your streets don't flood. That's the government's role, not everything else that they're doing, okay? The comptroller and clerk of the courts gave an audit to the city and said that some of the penny tax funds were mismanaged. Now, polls show that the penny tax is probably going to pass. However, if it were not to pass, I will tell you who the poster child is. Winter Springs for mismanaging that money. I would rather not give a government more money and make them live within their means than taxing you more for them to waste it.
Thank you. Commissioner Ben.
Penny sales tax. I do support it, and here's one of the reasons. If the penny sales tax were to fail, what would happen is any of those infrastructure needs, people don't just cut their belts, tighten up. What happens is they'll get the money from somewhere. They will get it from yours and my property taxes. If you rent, your landlord will pay those taxes. The money will come from somewhere. Right now, about 30%, maybe a little bit more than that, is paid from people outside our area on that penny sales tax. That's like getting 30% on your money. Pretty good investment. The other reason that I want to bring up about this is that with the penny sales tax audit that was just brought up, every other city in our county said it was unconstitutional. They refused to allow to do it. Our sister city here in Oviedo said no way. Their attorney said you're not going to do it. It was just a political hit. I'm going to be honest with you. That's what it was for. What our city, and I didn't have a lot of control over some of this, but what the city did with it, I looked at it, was pretty much what other cities did. They bought police cars, they did other things with it. That's what the penny sales tax, those are things that are allowed. They were allowable uses. Look at our sister cities and the county, even modeling the county, it was pretty much the same proportion of the way they spent the money. Thank you. Bye.
Ms. Meyer.
I certainly support the penny sales tax. It is contributed by your purchases and by out of the city residents who come into our city. And why would you not support extra funds that can be used for the betterment of your community? There are guidelines. Winter Springs does follow those guidelines, and I believe it is a valuable source of funds to make valuable improvement in our city. How funds are allocated depends on the decisions of the city. No one person makes those choices. It is a decision that is brought to the board, I presume. I've not been involved in that part of the commission, but I would expect that it is a consensus of opinion on how those funds are used. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Baker.
People have been talking about how the funds are used and that there's requirements on how those are used. And yes, they can move them, they can change their mind and put them into different buckets. But when residents are told that they should be going to roads or infrastructure or bridges, and then those things fail on us, and we see that that money has been spent elsewhere, it leaves a little bit of distrust in our mouth, and we don't like that. So as a person that's going to pay taxes, I'm still undecided on if I support the penny tax or not, because I think the city needs to be held accountable for where those funds are going. I don't know about you, but there's a street behind my house that's had cones in the middle of it for over a year. And those cones are there because of washout in the road. My bridge right next to my house has washout right now. It's a very heavily used bridge on Winter Springs Boulevard. So when funds are moved from bridges and roads to something like police cars, I'm not saying we don't want to support our police, we do, but we need to make sure that the things that the city says they're going to do follows through and does it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys all for coming tonight. We want to thank all the candidates for coming out and giving your opinion on things. Please remember that this is the place that most of the Highlands comes to vote over here in November. So keep everything that you heard tonight in your mind when you're going to vote and be informed.